The grand auditorium of Harvard University was packed. More than 2,000 students, professors, and media representatives filled the seats, buzzing with excitement. At the podium stood Professor Jonathan Whitfield, gray beard trimmed neatly, tweed jacket stiff with 40 years of privilege in academia. His voice carried that subtle arrogance only found in men who had never been challenged. Today, he announced, we examine leadership models from various backgrounds. The word backgrounds dripped from his tongue with disdain. He smirked, even from some unexpected speakers of developing regions who will attempt to contribute to our discussion. Laughter rippled through parts of the audience. In the third row, a young black man sat silently. He wore a plain military uniform, no medals, no ribbons. His nameplate read simply, Traore. Most assumed he was just an attaché, maybe a graduate student from Africa. None knew the truth. They were sitting a few feet away from the president of Burkina Faso. This was Ibrahim Traoré, soldier, revolutionary, linguist, mathematician, a leader who had once studied secretly through MIT's distance learning while leading a revolution at home. And he was here for one purpose, not revenge, but education. Not for himself, but for Harvard. 3 weeks earlier, Professor Whitfield had published an article titled The Intellectual Vacuum of African Leadership. In it, he had mocked Traoré by name, calling him another uneducated strong man. The article spread widely, reinforcing centuries of stereotypes that Africa was a land without thinkers, only warlords. Now, Whitfield was about to meet the man he had ridiculed. Our first speaker, the professor continued, glancing at his notes with clear disinterest, is someone from Burkina Faso, apparently a military representative who asked to speak on leadership. I must admit, I'm curious what insights an African soldier might offer Harvard minds. Chuckles again. Some students looked uncomfortable, others amused. Then, Ibrahim Traoré arose, calm, unhurried. He walked to the podium and waited. He looked across the sea of young faces, then gave a small, knowing smile. Professor Whitfield, he began in steady English, thank you for your generous introduction. You are correct. I am a soldier. What you may not know is that before I was a soldier, I was a teacher, a mathematics teacher, in a small village with no electricity, no running water, and no Harvard degrees on the wall. The professor smirked. How quaint. I'm sure your students learned arithmetic. Traoré didn't flinch. Actually, one of my students won the International Mathematical Olympiad. She is now at MIT. Gasps echoed. But that is beside the point. He tapped his phone, projecting a slide. Professor, since you write often about African intellectual capacity, let us have an academic discussion.
The professor chuckled. By all means. But I should warn you, I am the Carmichael Chair of Political Science, author of 12 books, 60 peer-reviewed papers. Impressive, said Traoré. Then you won't mind a simple question. What is the capital of Burkina Faso? Silence. The professor stammered. That's hardly relevant. Ouagadougou, Traoré answered smoothly. Population 2.5 million, founded in the 11th century. But perhaps that was too simple. Let's try governance. What are the 3 branches of Burkina Faso's government? Whitfield blinked, couldn't answer. Executive, legislative, judicial, Traoré supplied. We have a National Assembly with 127 members, a constitutional council, an independent judiciary. But let's not stay basic. He clicked again. A complex mathematical model filled the screen. This is the Solo Swan economic growth model, adapted for post-colonial economies. Professor, would you kindly explain how debt servicing and colonial infrastructure deficits are represented here. Whitfield shifted uncomfortably. This is political science, not mathematics. But you wrote extensively about African economic incompetence, Traore countered. Surely you understand the models behind your claims. Or did you make sweeping generalizations without understanding the math? A murmur swept through the hall. Phones came out, recording. Students whispered. Whitfield's face turned red. Traore changed the slide again. A French passage appeared. He read it fluently, then translated into perfect English. Rousseau's social contract. You cited this, Professor. Yet did you know that the Buganda Kingdom in Uganda had a parliamentary council called Lilukiko 3 centuries before Rousseau? The professor stammered. Traore switched suddenly to German, then Mandarin, then Arabic, then Portuguese. Each sentence fluent, flawless. Finally, he returned to English. I speak 7 languages. How many do you speak, Professor? Whitfield muttered. English and some French. Some French, Traore repeated. Yet you judge a continent where children grow up speaking 3 or 4 languages by default. You call us intellectually limited. The crowd erupted with whispers. Then a hand rose. Excuse me, sir, who are you? A pause. Then the young soldier smiled. I am Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso. The auditorium gasped. Cameras flashed. Whitfield went pale. He had mocked a head of state to his face in front of thousands. But Traore wasn't finished. He clicked again. Images of African achievements filled the screen. Ancient manuscripts of Timbuktu, the Ashango bone, 20,000 years old, showing knowledge of prime numbers. Benin's city walls, longer than China's Great Wall. Surgical tools from ancient Egypt performing cataract surgery, while Europeans blamed disease on evil spirits. You call us intellectually backward? These are our ancestors' works. Africa's intellectual legacy runs deeper than you dare to admit. He raised his voice. You want leadership examples? Thomas Sankara vaccinated 2.5 million children in 2 weeks. Wangari Maathai mobilized women to plant 51 million trees. Nelson Mandela forgave his oppressors to save his nation from civil war. These are leaders of intellect and heart. And yet you reduce us to caricatures of ignorance. That is not scholarship. That is arrogance dressed as academia. The crowd thundered with applause. Students stood, clapping, cheering. But Traore raised his hand. No, do not applaud. This is not about humiliating one man. This is about dismantling a myth. The myth that African minds are less than others. That myth has justified colonization, slavery, exploitation, and even now the denial of opportunity. The room grew still. You see, he said softly, Harvard prides itself on excellence. But excellence that excludes Africa is not excellence. It is provincialism, it is ignorance. He leaned closer to the microphone. Wisdom has no color. Excellence has no nationality. Intelligence has no continent. Until you learn that, all your degrees, all your honors mean nothing. They are decorations on an empty vessel. Silence. Then, thunderous applause. This time, no one stopped. The ovation lasted minutes. And the video? Within hours, it went viral. Millions watched across the world. Headlines screamed, African president destroys Harvard professor. But the real story wasn't humiliation. It was transformation. Months later, Whitfield resigned, admitting he needed to re-educate himself. He went to Burkina Faso. He taught English in a rural school. He learned the Dioula language. He returned to Harvard a changed man, and for the first time in his career, he placed African authors on his syllabus. As for Ibrahim Traoré, he never boasted of that day. When asked, he only smiled and said, I went to give a lecture. I hope the students learned something useful. Because for him, victory was never about silencing a professor. It was about awakening a generation. And perhaps it worked.
The scandal shook the very foundations of Harvard. Emails leaked, videos exposed. The world saw what had been hidden for decades: prejudice, hypocrisy, and deliberate exclusion of African minds from the so-called temples of knowledge. But the storm was only beginning. For years, whispers had traveled through the halls of global academia. Strange discoveries, unexpected breakthroughs, papers with anonymous authors that defied conventional wisdom. They appeared in physics, in mathematics, in philosophy. Works so brilliant that even the greatest professors could not ignore them. And slowly, one name surfaced, again and again: Burkina Faso. No one dared say it out loud. No one admitted the source. But now, with the truth of Harvard's corruption exposed, the world began connecting the dots. In Tokyo, a professor paused mid-lecture to marvel at new optimization methods emerging from West Africa. In Sao Paulo, an education expert revealed a teaching method from a Burkinabe village that outperformed Western pedagogy. In Beijing, a scholar published evidence that indigenous farming models from Africa were more sustainable than industrial agriculture. The pattern was undeniable. Africa was not following. Africa was leading. And then Ibrahim Traoré stepped forward again. This time, he did not come to defend himself. He came to reveal something the world had never seen. On stage, under bright lights, stood 12 children. Their eyes bright, their steps nervous, yet determined. They were not graduates of elite academies. They were the children of farmers, of traders, of teachers. Ordinary children from villages most Westerners could not even find on a map. Traore's voice was steady. Harvard claims I lack credentials. Perhaps, but allow me to introduce to you the true scholars of our land. A girl, no older than 14, stepped forward. On the board before her, a complex differential equation glared back, the kind that confounds graduate students. With chalk in hand, she solved it in 3 languages: French, Moray, English. Her reasoning was flawless, her mind electric. Next, a boy translated classical Arabic philosophy into English, then into his native tongue, before presenting insights that silenced even veteran scholars. Another recited the periodic table in poetic verse, transforming science into rhythm and memory. One by one, the children revealed inventions, theories, and insights, products of an education born not from rigid classrooms, but from culture, tradition, and freedom to think differently. Then came the revelation that shook the world. These children, Traore declared, holding a stack of journals high above his head, have already published 43 papers, peer-reviewed, recognized, cited, even by the very professors who denied their existence. But because their names did not carry European prestige, they were erased. Their brilliance was hidden behind the mask of anonymity. Now their faces are here before you. Silence. Cameras froze. The world stared at the undeniable truth. African children were producing knowledge that rivaled, even surpassed, the greatest institutions of the West. But Traore was not finished. Do not misunderstand. Harvard will now try to steal them. Western companies will try to lure them away with scholarships, contracts, promises of prestige. But this time, it will not happen. Their genius does not belong to Harvard. Their genius does not belong to Paris or London or Washington. Their genius belongs to Africa, and Africa will protect it. Then came his boldest announcement yet. The Indigenous Genius Project, a global initiative to identify and nurture intellectual talent using non-Western methods, funded not by Western aid, but by Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Education without chains, knowledge without borders, genius without permission. The declaration hit like thunder. The world gasped. Universities scrambled. Governments panicked. Donors hesitated. But for the youth of Africa, it was a spark. Applications poured in, not only from Burkina Faso, but from villages across Nigeria, Ghana, Mali, Kenya, South Africa. Even beyond Africa, indigenous children from Brazil, India, and the Pacific sent their work. The flood of brilliance could no longer be ignored. Within months, solar-powered buses rolled across villages carrying books, labs, and mentors. Fields became classrooms, marketplaces became universities, tradition became curriculum. Elders taught philosophy beside digital screens. Farmers shared models of agriculture that outperformed Western science. Children coded software under the shade of baobab trees. And the world began to notice. At the United Nations, Traore thundered. For centuries, you took our gold, our oil, our diamonds. And now you wish to take our genius. This is intellectual colonialism. We will not allow it. If you wish to learn from us, then come to Africa. Build your centers here. Send your students here. Stand beside us, not above us. The hall erupted. Some scoffed, others applauded, but none could deny the truth. The tide had shifted. Western corporations raced to open research hubs in Africa, not as masters, but as partners. For the first time, global giants sent their brightest minds to learn under African teachers. And still, the children led the way. Mariama, the girl who solved equations with ease, grew into a mathematician celebrated worldwide. When she stood to receive the Fields Medal, she did not thank Harvard. She thanked her grandmother, who taught her weaving as mathematics. She thanked her community, who turned culture into knowledge. She thanked her president, who believed in the brilliance of Africa's youth. That was the revolution. Not in headlines, not in medals, but in dignity. For centuries, the world told Africa, "You are less." Now Africa replied, "We are enough." Because the struggle was never about proving African intelligence. It was about proving this: human genius has no borders.